Hello and welcome to Camp Xbox. Bond and gaming is one of those combos that was strong in the 5th and 6th generations. From GoldenEye to Nightfire, there are some great titles, but most of these were first-person shooters. But in 2004, we would get a third-person shooter entry that would shake up the formula. I played through it recently, and let me give you some history and my review of it. All footage was captured on an original Xbox, and I want to thank my YouTube channel members for their support. But let's go ahead and hop into the history of this one.
Good morning, Q.
007, we have some new equipment for you. Have you met my new assistant, Miss Nagai?
I don't believe I've had the pleasure.
And you won't if I have any say in the matter. Now, pay attention, 007.
I feel like explaining James Bond is a tough thing to do, and honestly one that is not too necessary. He is one of the most iconic characters across media. But just in case you don't know, James Bond is a literary character made by Ian Fleming in the 50s and is a British secret intelligence spy. The books followed huge plots, beautiful women, and the suave spy in the middle. It wasn't till the 60s when the movie franchise was released that the character became a cultural icon, spanning to even today, and leaking into video games, with GoldenEye being considered one of the greatest games of all time, and leading us into the 6th generation of gaming. Though Everything or Nothing would be the third release of the Bond games on the Xbox, it would actually start production back in 2001. And this is because this game had the movie's prestige tied into it. The story was developed by Danny Bilson and Paul DeMeo, who did a lot of work at EA, but I know them mostly from the B-movie classic Trancers, which you should check out if you love old B-movies. Yet Bruce Firestein wrote the script for this game, and he wrote the first 3 Brosnan Bonds: GoldenEye, Tomorrow Never Dies, which is my personal favorite of Brosnan's run, and The World Is Not Enough. He would also connect the plot of this game to the older Bonds and show a connection to an interconnected universe. Not only that, they were bringing out big actors to be in this game to capture the cinematic feeling. Pierce Brosnan, Judi Dench, and John Cleese are all returning, and we also get Heidi Klum, Shannon Elizabeth, and Willem Dafoe all are rendered digitally into the game as well. Partly the reason why they would make this entry into the third person is so you could see Bond and experience all the work that they had put into putting him into this game. An interesting element of production of this game was the multiple teams working on it, with EA Redwood working on the shooter portions and EA Canada working on the driving portions. And all of this would work towards a planned holiday 2003 release, but they pushed it a few months to polish it, and it ended up coming out on February 17th, 2004 in North America, and just a few days later in Europe, getting a release on the PS2, GameCube, and Xbox. In the 6th generation, this was my Bond game. I played a ton of this game after picking up a Platinum Hits release on the Xbox, and I remember loving this one. I had experienced Bond games up to this point, but the cinematic part of this all captured a young movie lover like me. I haven't played this one to completion in a long time though, so I did recently, and let me break down my experience with it, starting with the plot.
I have a sinking feeling that won't be the last I'll see of her.
In Everything or Nothing, you play as James Bond. And what's cool about this entry is that it features an opening stinger. It's a massive action set piece before the opening titles, just like in the movies, and it's a fantastic way to kick off this game. You find yourself in a stronghold tasked with stealing a stolen bomb, which ignites an all-out battle right in the middle of this stronghold. The action is explosive and grand, and here you realize that Firestein captures a large, showy, blockbuster feel. It's not a slow spy movie, but a Bond action flick. Your opinions on this may vary, especially as we delve into the plot, which isn't necessarily the best, but I appreciate that it feels like it's attempting to find its place within the cinematic universe. It might come off as a lackluster movie plot, but one that can support the excitement you expect from a game. And I support this approach because I think it ultimately achieves a fun energy. As for the whole plot, it starts with a double cross, with you saving Heidi Klum playing Nana Nova, who, come to find out, is in league with with Nikolai Diavolo, who is creating nanobots capable of destroying metals and aims to use them to dominate the world. It's a globe-trotting adventure too, as you work alongside an American geologist and an NSA agent, and you'll drive through the streets of New Orleans, engage in rally racing, and take on spy underground bases. It's action-packed and offers a variety of things to do and places to visit, capturing the essence of a multi-million-dollar movie and distilling it into a game. Sure, the plot is cliché and a bit silly, but it's hard not to admire what's achieved here. It's undeniably entertaining. It feels exactly like a dumb, fun Bond plot, with Bond girls, over-the-top action, and loads of one-liners. And I'll put my bias on the table. It is important as a reviewer to acknowledge bias since it is inherent, and I just love James Bond. I've seen all of the movies, and as a fan, I can appreciate the plot here. As a non-Bond fan, you might find it a bit humorous, but the context of the movies does help elevate this to be a little more entertaining. It's large in scope and loaded with action. I think all of the actors contribute to a nice sense of authenticity, and it's simply a good time, especially when you see Bond free-falling off of cliffs and jumping with motorcycles over rooftops. If you're a fan of action movies, it's enjoyable and well-produced. Everything or Nothing is a third-person shooter for around half of the game. You get an assortment of weapons and gadgets that you use to traverse linear levels and take out enemies. Moving Bond around feels excellent, and I like that there's a limited set of gadgets, which in turn means that all of them have a good amount of time to be used. I always experience games with massive arsenals with worthless gadgets or weapons in the mix, and you don't get to use them. But here you don't get that. Constantly you're going up to walls and rappelling up or down. There are grates everywhere for you to use the Q spider, which might help you get more health or take out some enemies. There's also stealth levels where you can use an invisible shield to sneak better. Seeing this in third person, watching Bond move, feels right, and it allows for elements like hand-to-hand combat to take more prominence. The combat is simple, and swapping the gadgets in combat pauses the game and makes for a well-controlling experience. The best word to use here is smooth. Unfortunately, the shooting needs a bit of work. Everything or Nothing uses a lock-on system, and you must hold down the left trigger to lock on, and do not attempt to just not use it. It will fail 90% of your shots if you don't lock on. It feels smooth when it works, especially when there is one enemy on screen. It's easy to click and shoot, but when there are multiple enemies, it has a lot of issues. I found that it was inconsistent with who it would aim at and would go to someone in the back versus someone just right in front of you. It makes dying easy because you can't focus on your closest enemy, something that makes it more frustrating than challenging. To be fair, it doesn't happen all the time, and most of the time the shooting works, but those few times where it fails, it's a bit annoying. The stealth also could be better here. Some levels really push the stealth angle, but enemy detection is way too easy, there's no losing notoriety, and it becomes a shooting match quickly. The thing is though, that despite these issues, this game does a good job of having a nice energy and action to keep it fun the whole time. There's always gunfights and explosions, and this game has a kinetic energy that makes it hard to put down, and this is almost a 10-hour game, and this game stays consistently entertaining the whole time. There are so many new areas to explore and set pieces like an exploding base or a laser grid you have to dodge. It maintains being fresh the whole time. You never feel like it's repetitive, and of course the driving levels help out with this. Driving is not perfect in this game by any means. The controls are a little floaty, but I do think there's a nice variety injection in this and makes for some great cinematic moments. There's a mission of you destroying underground support structures in Russia, and there's also a mission where you're dodging traffic in New Orleans. It's insane, and that's the way I like it. It's a rush dodging cars or jumping on buildings with a motorcycle, and all of the moments, though a bit floaty, feel good and make for an action-packed experience. The idea is interesting too because it gives you open world areas that you can explore. In New Orleans, it feels like a Grand Theft Auto game, allowing you to leave your car. It's honestly a bit surprising, and it makes this entry even more unique. If you like a car game that has you blasting enemies with missiles while doing crazy jumps, On top of all this, you get a co-op multiplayer mode, which allows you to go through missions tailored specifically for co-op, which is a neat addition. This unlocks an arena mode, and there's different modes to tackle the co-op together, like getting the best score or best time. Once again, it's another injection of variety into the gameplay. Not only does this game retain some replayability with the scoring system in the mission mode, asking you to do more Bond moments, which are stunts that you have to go out of your way for, or doing silly things like massaging a woman. There's a lot going on here, but at its core, it's a fun game. The gameplay has some issues, particularly in aiming, but it does a good job of keeping variety and pacing strong. The quick energy and driving levels help elevate this game, and it makes it a blast. The visuals have a nice, sleek look with what I feel is an EA sleekness. I feel like EA games at this time had a clean and similar look, though this one doesn't use the Sims face models that were very common. Here they render the faces of the actors like Brosnan and more, even with Richard Kiel reprising his role as Jaws. You also get new Bond girls with notable actresses, and Dafoe as a villain is perfect. And seeing his face as the villain elevates this. For facial fidelity in the 6th generation, this rocks. It's clean and the animations are great, and seeing all of these actors in their roles is authentic. I think it feels like a continuation of the Brosnan era because of it. You can also tell this game is expensive. So much is happening in these levels. There are explosion and destruction effects galore. It's wild how many effects are displayed on screen at one time. There is some reuse of levels, but there's enough variety in locales to keep each section of the game unique. The cars look sleek and stand out on the road, and I love the globe-trotting feeling of Bond, and here it's replicated, and it leads to a great experience. All displayed in 480p widescreen on the Xbox, and it looks solid. I don't think it's the best looking game on the console, but it's one of the best movie tie-in games you can get at the time. One of the coolest parts of this game is that it gets its own Bond theme, a quintessential part of the Bond movies. Here it is Everything or Nothing, sung by Maya, which I think is a fun song. It's got a nice synth backing, and the bass line is a little funky, and I think here we get a nice techno-edged Bond theme that feels like a better attempt at what Madonna was trying with Die Another Day, and I think it's a good Bond theme overall. I would not put it near the top of all time, but there are far worse Bond songs out there. Of course, not only is there a Bond song, but the Bond theme and other music is plastered all over this. You're gonna be hearing the famous Bond riff over and over. Maybe not as bad as Agent Under Fire, but it is present. It's a great song, but these games tend to overplay it. The other music does at least match a cinematic orchestral tone that doesn't go for anything cheap sounding. I'd say the music overall is solid. The voice acting, though, is fantastic. Sometimes getting actors to reprise their roles can lead to stagnant voice delivery, but you don't get that here. Brosnan is in full form, and the Bond girls are solid, and John Cleese and Judi Dench are not phoning it in either and deliver solid performances. It's on point with their movie roles. But most notably, you get one of the most iconic voices in Hollywood, Willem Dafoe. Dafoe is a perfect villain here, and even when he's delivering lame world domination lines, it just comes out really fun rather than groan-worthy. All other sound work is well done here too, with great gunshot noises and small touches like the cloak of your invisibility having a unique noise. Explosions sound solid, and all of the sound effects are big and bombastic, and it gives you that blockbuster feeling. As a Bond fan, Everything or Nothing clicks. It's got a fun story and feels close to a movie, and honestly, it's more entertaining than The World Is Not Enough just from a few years prior. It has a good theme, music, and all of the actors are here and performing well. Its stealth is a little weak and the aiming is a bit painful, but it doesn't detract enough to even be remotely a bad game. With plenty of shooting and riveting levels, there is high-octane entertainment here. This game is fun the whole time. It's like going to see a dumb action movie, but you get to do all of the action. It captures a feeling that I really appreciated, and it's another in the good lineup of Bond games on the Xbox. On my ranking list of original Xbox games I've covered on the channel, Everything or Nothing enters in at number 31 out of the 106 games I've covered so far. I put it above Rally Sport Challenge, which is funny because this entry has a racing level, but I think Everything or Nothing's grandiose scale has something that's more memorable versus Rally Sport, which is a great game but has a sequel that I think one-ups it a lot. And I'm gonna put Jedi Academy above Everything or Nothing, which is another franchise game that captures the feel of its movies, and I'd say the combat there has less issues than this one. So ranking up the 3 Bond games I've covered, I'd go for Nightfire, Everything or Nothing, then Agent Under Fire. And I actually ranked these Bond games in a separate video, and I had originally put Agent Under Fire above this one, but now I feel like Everything or Nothing's authenticity moves this one up a little bit. But I still think Nightfire is the best of the bunch here, with its incredible level design. Everything or Nothing released to generally favorable reviews upon release, getting an 83 out of 100 on Metacritic. IGN gave it an 8.5, saying that it was almost more compelling than the most recent movies. GameSpot gave it an 8.8, saying this one puts you in Bond's shoes more than any game before it. In the March 2004 edition of Official Xbox Magazine, they gave a massive 4-page review to this one, and ultimately Vincent Lopez gave this an 8.2, saying it felt like playing a Bond movie, but found the driving levels to not be as challenging as he wanted. This game was a sales success though, with it selling around 600,000 copies according to VG Charts, and it got itself a Platinum Hits release on the Xbox, a Greatest Hits on PS2, and Player's Choice on GameCube. It did well enough, and that's not even the end of Bond in 2004. Later that year we would get GoldenEye Rogue Agent, which would be made by a different EA studio. Redwood would go on after this to develop one more with From Russia with Love, and as far as Brosnan goes, this was the end of his run not only in gaming but in movies. Technically, this is his last Bond original story. His time with the movies would end with the abysmal backlash of Die Another Day, and even though he was ready to do another, the team behind Bond was ready to move on from him. I know for a lot of Bond fans, they consider this the last hurrah, which his Bond is divisive, but I also found him to be the one that a lot of people think of as having the Bond look. And I have to agree with that. I don't think the failure of his later movies was his fault at all and was more of an issue from a writing standpoint. But nowadays, I still see praise for this game all over the place, and on Backlogged, it holds an average of 3.5 out of 5 with over 1,000 plays. A lot of reviewers share the sentiment that it feels like a Bond movie and is fun, but you'll see some who found it frustrating and the aiming to be rough. Though overall, I'd say this is a positive experience to many who enjoy Bond, like myself. But that does wrap it up for today. If you enjoyed this review, please leave a like, it helps me on the algorithm. Comment below with any memories of this game, love it or hate it. Subscribe to keep up with the retro Xbox content, and check out my second channel, Camp Extras, for more retro content. And I want to give a huge shout out to my YouTube channel members. Thank you so much for your support, you really help out the channel. But I'll see you here next time at Camp Xbox.